that you have basic knowledge of Git. Remember, Git machine for managing your code and versioning your code changes, right? And you can create branches and all that locally. GitHub, which is the hub for Git repos, where you can then host all your Git repos centrally so that you can collaborate with other software developers and share code together, is different, right? But to really know how to use GitHub well, you still need a basic understanding of Git. And Git itself is mostly a command line um, interface technology. So you need to learn some of the commands like git clone, git pull, git push, and some of the flags and things like that. For example, in the book, I really I highlighted most part of that in the first two chapters. But I will also share with you other learning resources you can use in this session. So you need to understand Git. You need to understand GitHub in general, how to move around the interface. Sometimes they will ask you tricky questions about your menu, about some of the tabs that are there. It's good to familiarize yourself with GitHub. And then up next, working with GitHub repositories, right? You need to know how to be able to manage repositories and host your repositories on GitHub, or create a new repository and create branches and manage branches and things like that. Then the collaboration features. Remember, GitHub is the one that made coding really fun to do. In fact, some people call GitHub social coding. We thrive in that ability to improve the collaboration of software developers to write code, and not just developers, right? We are seeing many more roles coming onto GitHub now, particularly with the AI, at the advent of the AI features that are now embedded across the platform. You will see many more people that are not natural coders now able to come in and build software or work with people that build software, right? So those collaboration features, the pull requests, issues, how to raise comments and interact and reply to issues, how to comment certain lines of the code during your review process, how to go back and forth on code, and how to create discussion forums and votes on certain topics or feature requests or bugs and things like that. So those collaboration features. And then modern development, right? Understanding basics around CI/CD, how you can automate and integrate your code with the rest of the production code in the branch, how you can run certain builds and pipeline and package and deploy them, just the basics of CI/CD and some of the ways you can do modern development on GitHub. Then 7% on project management, right? How can you manage a sprint or iteration? How can you work with the Kanban boards on GitHub projects? How can work with roadmap timelines and things like that? So they will be asking you, some basic project management features on GitHub. And of course, security, how you can, manage repositories, to open source them or to keep them private, differences between internal repositories and private repositories. For example, being able to share repositories or invite collaborators to your repository and things like that, and managing the general and overall security and control of your repo. And of course, they will also ask you some questions around community, around discussions, around sponsors, and how you can get sponsors for an open source project and things like that. Now, if we take a look at this very well, you will see that number 1 and number 3 together form about 52% of the entire score. So if you can do those two sections very well, you will likely ace the exam, right? So focus a lot on Git and GitHub, which takes about 22% of the entire mark, and collaboration features as well. This is really very important. So if you can ace those ones very well, and you get a little bit of some of the other ones, you are likely going to pass the exam. Okay, so preparing for the exam, right? This is really recommended for a beginner. You need to understand the Git concept, as I mentioned, know how to work with the interface. Sometimes they might ask you when you go to settings, what do you click on? What do you enable, or what do you turn off? For example, they may just ask you tricky questions like that. There are sometimes they may ask you questions around Git commands, where they can give you maybe four options. They will all look alike, but they will deliberately leave some characters there uh, that only one of them is the correct answer, right? So they might have two dashes or one dash, and they might miss one word and just omit some things. So they will look similar, but there is only one of them that is correct. If you've tried this yourself before, you will know the answer. But if you haven't, and maybe all you just did was read a book somewhere, then you may not notice the problem. So it's also important to try to do some of the challenge labs. In the book I published, there are some challenge labs that are available as well, free with the book, where you can just go and practice and follow some of those steps and instructions. There'll be questions around using Markdown to generate issues or to write documentation, and they might, ask you questions around the Markdown and give you like 3 or 4 options on how to write a Markdown, and they will write one wrongly. And remember, Markdown itself is its syntax. It's a kind of language, and so many other platforms support Markdown, but GitHub has its own particular kind of Markdown language. We call it the GitHub flavored Markdown syntax. So you can Google that and understand that. It's also in the book. You can look for the GitHub flavored Markdown. This helps you as a business analyst or a project manager or a non-technical person to write documentation and some of your assets as code and store it alongside the code base in the repository on GitHub. So that can really help. I would recommend going through some of the learning paths that are available there. Spend some time to use and do some of those challenge labs, and then work with repos, create a sample repo, check in, try to commit your changes, try to push, and try to clone, and then create issues and things like that. Benefits in terms of the certification. It really helps you to validate real world GitHub usage skills. Once you have that certification, you're confident that you've got the understanding of the most widely developed tool in the world. GitHub today has over 180 million plus people on GitHub. So it is by far the largest platform where software is built today. In fact, as we're speaking right now, the software you're using to speak with me, or the software that you're running right now on your computer or with your clients, is likely built on GitHub, or some of its components were built on GitHub. So GitHub is that huge. So if you've got a certification on GitHub, everyone recognizes it. It's recognizable across the world. So it can enhance your career prospects and your credentials as a person in the DevOps and IT space. And people will know that you understand what you're talking about, right? And you can also add that badge to your Microsoft Learn profile. So GitHub is part of the Microsoft family. So wherever you've been storing your existing GitHub Microsoft certification credentials and publishing them, you can also publish them there as well on Microsoft Learn. In terms of exam logistics, right? There are a number of key things that are important to note. You can write the exam both in person at your nearest Pearson testing center, or you can write it online virtually as well. So you can register that on Microsoft Learn. We also have GitHub Learn that was newly launched. I'll take you through that shortly. So you register for the exam. You choose the dates that is convenient for you, and then you choose whether you want to do it in person or you want to do this virtually. If you're doing it in person, it'd be good to choose the one that is closest to you. And usually at these testing centers, they will ask you for a government issued ID. So be sure to go to the exam along with your government issued identification, because they're going to ask that as well, and they will take photos of that. Now, one thing that is very important, right, between the online proctored exam and the in-person proctored exam, both of them are proctored, which means you will have an invigilator that is supervising the exam process in person. Uh, Usually, these are testing centers that have been certified, and they've got particular ways where they've arranged your exam sitting area. But if you're doing it from home or from your home office or from office virtually, if you choose the virtual option, be sure that where you are going to sit for that exam is not full of clutter. Make sure you declutter the environment, right? Because they will need to have access to your camera, and you have to turn your camera on. And you also need to have a microphone you can speak to them, because the proctor can see your screen. And the proctor, before you start the exam, may ask to see the environment around you, because they want to be sure that you don't have one book somewhere or one computer somewhere where you're checking for the answers. So even your mobile phone, they will ask you to turn it off or you put it somewhere very far away. They will ask you to actually grab the camera and show them around the room in which you're writing the exam. They may even say, "Can I see under your desk?" They will ask you to move your camera around to be sure that it is not full of clutter. So if you are in a space where you can be distracted, or there's a TV and things like that, make sure you turn everything off. Make sure there is clear space around where you're writing the exam. They also don't like it if someone is speaking to you. So make sure your family members are far away from where you're writing the exam, or they keep it very quiet. Because the proctor, if they suspect any kind of malpractice, they